Greetings, travelers. Leveling in Final Fantasy XIV is something I don't really talk about very much. At this point, I don't level a whole lot anymore, so it can be hard for me to relate to everyone after sinking a billion hours into this game. Despite my lack of direct leveling in recent history, there are some things I do start to wonder about when it comes to the leveling journey and what jobs people end up playing. If you are a new player going into Final Fantasy XIV and you want to play a healer in an MMORPG for some godforsaken reason, either because of previous experience from other games or you simply enjoy the concept of not having to do damage only for that dream.
See, for me, it was there was like a huge difference between tanking as a sprout and healing as a sprout. I decided to tank, thinking that how bad can it really be? Like you need to use your cooldowns and everything, and you're pretty much responsible for yourself. You kind of are the person who everyone is kind of looking at and waiting for them to fail, but at the same time, I would have been mortified to start a new game and start healing. I've never healed in my life. I hadn't tanked in my life before Final Fantasy either. But like for some reason, these two are not the same thing for me.
Immediately shattered. Starting a new character in Final Fantasy XIV and wanting to heal gives you a plethora of options. Just kidding. You don't have a choice. You're going to play Conjurer. Obviously, this is still a remnant from the class system, but Conjurer turns into White Mage at level 30 after doing the appropriate job quest. So yes, you're playing White Mage. A common sentiment that you'll hear repeated over and over among players is that White Mage is the easiest and most straightforward healer in the game. So easy, in fact, that my mother, who doesn't play any video games, could probably play it. Look, she doesn't really understand my hobby, but tries to understand it anyways. Thanks, Mom. But I don't think
Aw.
someone who has never moved a character in a video game before would be able to pull it off. But of course, all of this really makes me wonder if it's actually that much easier than the other healers. Talking about White Mage is already the hottest take in Final Fantasy XIV because seemingly no matter what happens to the job, its play rate is always sky high. It's so fucking high that they
Well, everyone starts with White Mage, right? If you I don't know if you. Well, not everyone starts as White Mage. You can pick up any healer later on, but if you want to pick your first character not first character, first job, and you want it to be a healer, if you do pick White Mage, I don't know, you're kind of inclined to stick to it, I guess, once you kind of learn the ropes and realize that it's not really that bad. So I don't know. Like I don't see anyone leveling something else and then I don't know, wanting to level a healer and then choosing to go from a healer that starts at level 1. Normally people will be like, okay, I don't want to start at level 1 now. I will start at like level 30 or I don't know, now level 70 as Sage or whatever. I'm not saying it's a good decision, but sometimes if people don't want to level all their jobs to like max level, I guess that's what happens. I don't know.
could make it so that every time you cast a spell, it would kill an orphan and people would still play this job. Which brings me to my question. Why do so many people play this healer, especially among casuals? Well, I have a little bit of a conspiracy theory that I'm sure you all want to know. It's literally because White Mage is the only healer that you can play when you first start playing the game. This is one of the classic, you can know the numbers, as in how many people play White Mage, but understanding the numbers is a different thing entirely. So obviously, I'm going to need to bring the other three healers into my conspiracy theory equation, and why I think most people switch into them from a casual perspective. Scholar is a job that you can only unlock after leveling a DPS class for 30 levels. It's not straightforward. It's not something
Okay.
that most new players are going to do unless they are hell bent on being a scholar player. I guess you're just really into books or fairies or both. Because there is not a chance in hell that someone would start up the game with no prior information, want to play a healer, and choose Arcanist because they thought it would turn into a healing job, it doesn't even make sense when I told you that.
It doesn't even say it. Like I didn't even know it. I went through the entirety of the MSQ and I didn't even know I could get like a bonus job pretty much if I play
But
it.
not only that, trying to play a shield healer after you played a regen healer is harder in trash pulls. if you're not used to having to press a few buttons every now and again. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself with that one. Even if you want to play the other healers because that is your goal, you would probably want to play the job archetype that you plan on playing at first and go unlock a different job later. Like if I wanted to play Dancer, wouldn't I want to start the game as a physical ranged first and then switch to Dancer later? It seems like that's what most people want and what
Yeah.
most people try to do. Scholar ends up being off the table partly for that reason as well, but your next choice would be Astrologian. Back when the game devs didn't realize that putting the unlock for a job behind getting to the first quest of the first expansion means that most players are going to have to level down like 30 levels to unlock it. And for most people who don't want to level more than one job to max, that's pretty fucking shitty.
It
Yes, I am
is.
totally going to sidetrack the entire story adventure that I'm supposed to be very into right now just to unlock a different healer, which you'd only really consider at that point if you really want to play Astro or if you already hate White Mage. Which brings us to now Sage. Sage is the only healer that, if you want to play it, you can start the game as a healer, level to level 70, and unlock it without losing any of your leveling progress.
This particular thing that you can do makes me not trust sages because it's just so easy to like unlock it and start off as a new healer with no experience whatsoever. And sage does not seem as self-explanatory as some of the other healers. So normally when I queue in with sage, like if I tag, I'm being so very careful.
For your amazing MSQ first time experience and never have to change your role archetype. This alone is going to be massive for why these two healers are going to be ahead in terms of popularity, pretty much regardless of how they play. That, and the fact that Sage is new and shiny, even though Scholar and Sage are incredibly similar. But unlocking Scholar isn't super common for reasons that I discussed earlier. Astro, while not as bad, will still lose a massive chunk of people to being impossible to unlock without leveling down at all. The only Heavensward job that seemed to defy this trope was Dark Knight, but with another edgy class introduced into the game that new players don't have to level down for, I do think that might end up contributing to Dark Knight losing interest over time, but time will tell. That's another conspiracy theory for a different day. My biggest point here is that the game funnels you into playing White Mage first and was not going to encourage you to even consider other options until Sage was introduced. Speaking of Sage specifically, shield healing, a sacred art that some old Astro players will continually mourn the loss of Nocturnal Sect for. I will concede that it is merely a difference of opinion, but it is easier to get value out of regens and trash pulls when compared to shields. Not that any of these jobs have to expend more than a single ounce of energy to keep tanks alive, but pressing the regen button and stunning all the enemies with Holy is pretty goddamn straightforward and easy. Thus, I will still insist that White Mage is the most casual friendly healer for this reason alone.
That is such an OP thing to be able to do, right?
Even though most casuals don't even have Holy on the bar. Just comparatively, you probably have to press 5 or maybe even 6 buttons on a shield healer to get through a trash pull. And while I'm still being belittling about it, it is technically more complicated since you have to press more buttons. But the other reason why it's a little bit different is because you want to constantly weave heals, which is not a skill that White Mage really teaches you. Instead, White Mage teaches you how to GCD heal, a skill that is still important to have, contrary to popular belief, but it's not as easy to use that skill set on other healers. Weaving itself is a much more transferable skill between the other three healers. Also, on the topic of weaving and pressing more buttons, it also reminds me of hearing this phrase that White Mage has lots of panic buttons.
I love how his videos are like guides, like wrapped up in something that isn't really a guide. When you click on it, you don't expect it at all, but you do learn things.
Yeah? Like what? Benediction? Have you ever seen how many fucking panic buttons Astro has? It has so many panic buttons that I've run out of hotbar space to put all of them. Please make Crown Draw and Crown Play one button. I'm fucking begging you. What about all the instant cast weaving tools on all the other healers? Don't those count for anything? I think it is way easier to spot heal on literally any other healer than White Mage in most circumstances. And in that way, I think White Mage is much harder to play. I don't think the other healers are that bad, I say to myself as I drift my card draw into next expansion.
I mean, I started with Astro, and so far I'm having an okay time. I don't like healing, but I don't see how it's hard.
But if you swap off of your main for 2 seconds and immediately encounter resistance, everyone's going to switch back to comfort, which is the real reason why White Mage is perceived as easy. Not because it has less buttons, not because it has regens, not because it's straightforward, it's because it's the healer that most players have already put the most time into. Because you didn't get a choice when you first made your character. And being aware of what your healing tools are
Short.
and using them is the most important thing to be successful on healer. Astrologen has higher healing output unless you're mashing Cure 3, in which case, my condolences for your already pitiful MP economy. But even though it's the best healer in trash pulls that doesn't wield an axe, White Mage ends up just being a healer that doesn't need to weave and needs to use GCD heals instead, which means it can be a little slower paced, but not necessarily easier to execute than other healers. I really do think
I think it's just about how easy of a choice it is. Like the thing that he talked about at the beginning of the video. It is the default, and I don't know. I think that people just kind of don't like going out of their way to do other things after that.
players and
Kind of a
define one
pity.
specific job of an archetype that rewards you for being familiar with your cooldowns is why White Mage is always going to be popular among casuals. It is a feature of the game design. I would be kind of curious how many people have a White Mage at max level and no other job in the game. Too bad that I'm not going to look at the numbers. Now let's get into the news and throw all of my opinions into the garbage where they belong.
Oh gosh. That was a good video though. It makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, I started leveling my white mage as my first healer. I got to level like what? I think I'm like level 12 and I got bored. So I decided to try another one, but I don't think many people do that. I had a lot of external encouragement to try something other than white mage as well. If white mage is boring to me, which maybe not everyone has, someone who's going to be like, "Oh, you'll be fine. You can do this." I was encouraged to try Sage, but I think I know better than that as someone who has not ever healed before. So I'm sticking with Astro, and I'm actually kind of okay with it. I like how there are like how it's. I like how busy it is. Like how you can do other things and kind of help the group in some other way apart from the healing. I really enjoy that. So I don't know. Like I like it as my first pick, to be honest.